Now for today's other big story. When Parliament convenes tomorrow for a special debate on the crisis in America, the Prime Minister will face a new opponent across the dispatch box. Ian Duncan Smith became the leader of the Conservative Party today. He will be the man who leads his party in solidarity with the government over the tragedy in the United States. And in the last hour or so, Mr. Duncan Smith has released details of his shadow cabinet. Our political editor, Martha Carney, saw the new leader's respectfully muted coronation.
It was by necessity a far more sombre affair than originally planned, out of respect to those lost in America. After 15 weeks of grueling campaigning, generally acknowledged to be pretty damaging to the party, today a new leader emerged. It said all political careers end in failure, but Ken Clarke took his defeat gracefully.
I congratulate Ian on his success, and I wish him every success in leading the party back to election victory, and he'll have all our support in trying to do that.
He had staked a great deal on his ability to attack Labour, but the new leader won't have that opportunity for a while. Bipartisanship will rule.
Today is not the day for party politics, notwithstanding this election. On Tuesday, all of us witnessed a series of appalling acts which have so destroyed the lives of far too many people. What President Bush called an act of war must not go unpunished.
A theme he's certain to develop in his common speech tomorrow.
As the media circus departs, it's clear that Ian Duncan Smith supporters, at any rate, are jubilant. But there are some coded words of warning from people who are part of Kenneth Clarke's campaign.
I'm extremely disappointed for Ken, and I think with all the events this week, I think Ken's wealth of experience under fire, the party would have been very well served, and perhaps Ian will see fit to offer Ken a senior position in the party. He was very greatly missed in the last Parliament, and I don't think we can afford to lose his talents.
So do you think in a way it is a worry for the party to have such an inexperienced leader at such a grave time?
I think it will be a great test for Ian. I'm very confident he will rise to the occasion. But it is obviously someone who is less tried and tested. He's been on the front bench for only 3 years in the shadow cabinet position.
So how will party policy evolve? One Duncan Smith supporter wants it based on his pledge in the Newsnight debate, never to join a single currency.
That is a policy which is not only sustainable but the right one, because this is a constitutional and political issue, and a huge number of people in this country agree with that. The percentages go up to 60-70%.
So do you think he will make it party policy?
Well, I very much hope so, because that's what he said in the Newsnight programme.
That could lead to difficulties. It's hard to imagine a pro-European like Ian Taylor staying in the party with a policy like that.
Are you going to stay in the party no matter what?
Oh, I'm a Conservative. I have no intention of leaving my party, and I profoundly hope my party doesn't leave me.
I can't think of a more difficult time and a more difficult one than this. For Ian to find and bring the party together is going to be a very difficult thing to do. Not in the immediate term. There's going to be no question in the immediate term. All our minds are quite obviously, frankly, on other things and about what happened in New York. But in the months to come, it is going to be vitally important that the party is handled with sensitivity and given that kind of leadership.
So it's clear that the Tory divisions are barely hidden, and no doubt there would have been more open feuding had it not been for the change in political climate. So how will Ian Duncan Smith cope?
He wants to bring together a shadow cabinet, a front bench team, which will include people who are much more pro the European Union and the European single currency than he is. And I think that will be seen in the policies that he sets out. I think it's for him to say whether he wants to clarify the policy further from the very successful policy we had during the last general election, which was, after all, backed by 70% of the British public.
You going to get a job?
I've no idea. You'll have to ask him.
No news on him yet, but here's the rest. There were awards for rival candidates who'd moved over to the IDS camp. David Davis, successful chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, becomes party chairman, taking over from Michael Ancram, who moves to Shadow Foreign Secretary. Key members of the IDS campaign team were also promoted. Bernard Jenkin goes to Defence, David Maclean is Chief Whip. A veteran of the Thatcher Major years, Michael Howard becomes Shadow Chancellor. The post of Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland is reinstated and given to Jacqui. By way of balance, Quentin Davis, a pro-European, becomes Northern Ireland shadow. It's thought Damien Green, another Clark supporter, will take the education portfolio. David Willets, who supported Portillo, stays at Social Security. And resting on his laurels from an eccentric election campaign, Oliver Letwin, the man who went to ground in Dorset, becomes Shadow Home Secretary, ousting Anne Widdecombe. A team with a huge task in front of them to cut Labour's enormous majority by inspiring a sceptical electorate.
I hate all politicians, they're all liars. I wouldn't vote for any of them. Duncan Smith, Ken Bate, the lot's all rubbish.
He had that William Hague in the back of his cab once.
Martha Carney she'll be joining us a little later, but for now I'm joined by the Conservative Party chairman of 5 Hours, David Davis. David Davis, how is Ian Duncan Smith going to be any different from William Hague? Nothing's changed.
Well, I think what you'll see in the morning is a shadow cabinet really aimed at performance, at cutting that lead we were hearing about on your clip there. But may I just say,
where's the radical appointments? You can't really call Michael Howard a shadow chancellor a radical appointment.
Oh, I think you'll find he's going to be a formidable appointment. I think he's going to give Gordon Brown the most difficult few years of his political career because he's got a forensic mind, a fantastic debating style in the Commons, and he'll be able to show Mr. Brown's serious shortcomings as a Chancellor.
So where's Ian Duncan Smith going to be different from William Hague in Europe?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say here is that when he actually made his brief speech today, accepting the leadership, he didn't talk about Europe. What he talked about was the issue of the day, the matter that's got everybody's attention, this dreadful threat to the Western world, and he will be focusing on the important things, what matters to the public. And this is what matters to the public. This matters to the public, the threat to the Western world.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at some other areas that you thought would matter to the public during the campaign. I mean, how are you going to reach out to the centre ground? For example, what about Ian Duncan Smith's latter-day support for the change in Section 28?
Well, I think you'll see in the morning when the shadow cabinet comes out. I think you'll see in the morning when the shadow cabinet comes out. You're going to have a shadow cabinet of all the talents. One which is designed...
Or to keep some Europhiles on board?
Oh, it's not. It's more than just to keep some Europhiles on board. I think if you do it that way, you'll probably find about half a dozen left wing of the party, about half a dozen of the social liberals, the Portillista group, but you're going to find half of them are going to be new. And it's the biggest transformation in a shadow cabinet probably in modern times.
So does he support the government in changing Section 28 or not?
Well, that'll be to be dealt with when we come to that point. Today, against the background of the headlines you're going to talk about later, this is not an issue to be talked about today. The issues today about the threats to the Western world.
Did you offer Ken Clarke a job? Did he offer Ken Clarke a job?
That I don't know. I can't comment on that.
The contest itself has been hugely damaging to the party. Will you change the rules for election?
I'm not sure that you're right about that. We've seen a large number, I think tens of thousands of extra members join since the beginning of this contest. All contests of this nature are tough. The arguments are fierce. Sometimes they get personal, perhaps they shouldn't, but sometimes they do. But what we've got to do now, what Ken Clarke recognised and what Ian recognised, we've got to pull together to actually deliver an opposition that can challenge this government, cut this lead, demonstrate its failures. That's what we're going to do.
But at the end of the day, no matter how much you say this, and certainly over the next few days, of course, it's going to be about the horrific actions in America. In the end of the day, what is going to split your party is the euro. You can't stop the party being obsessed by the euro, can you?
You didn't see that in the clips you were seeing earlier here. You had interviewed actually a number of Europhile members of Parliament, and what you heard was them
maybe
saying...
Maybe the party will leave me, someone said.
Them recognising... I mean, one of them actually recognised earlier that this was a clear-cut result, very clear. The party in the country has said what it wants. What it wants is Ian Duncan Smith, a new face who's going to deliver a party that can take on the government, can do the job of opposition, and can come up with new policies on public services, on things that matter to people. Let me just say this to you. Our original intention, before the circumstances of the last few days, had been to lead the release of names with the release of those shadow cabinet members who handle public services. But we decided actually that wasn't appropriate today. That wasn't the issue that we're going to lead on today because of the seriousness of the situation we find ourselves in. But we will come back to public services. We will come back to all the things that matter, and this shadow cabinet will deliver on
David Davis, thank you very much. Well, I'm joined now by Peter Oborne from The Spectator and George Jones from The Telegraph. First of all, can it ever be a whole party again?
I think that Ian Duncan Smith helped it on its way. The new party chairman, David Davis, appointed so that rival candidates had their hands in the blood too, was making the point that no mention of Europe in that leadership speech. And he did concentrate on education, health.
Well, it wasn't unexpected, was it? I mean, he wasn't going to raise the question of Europe in his acceptance speech.
Well, it's the issue which has obsessed the party for 10 years. It was very notable that it wasn't mentioned in an acceptance speech. And likewise, as we're seeing the shadow cabinet unfold, we're beginning to note we have got Quentin Davies, and hitherto, I have to say, rather obscure pro-European, but nevertheless a pro-European. And one imagines Damien Green will get a very senior job. And I do think that Ken Clarke, there was some sort of reference to a job offer. I don't know if you noticed, at the press conference at 5 o'clock this afternoon.
Tell me, are you as optimistic as Peter Oborne seems to be that Ian Duncan Smith can, as it were, paper the cracks?
I am, and I think Ian Duncan Smith is a much more mature politician than the kind of caricature that there is about him, you know, the sort of right-winger Eurosceptic William Hague without the charisma. Actually, I think he's a much more successful politician. When he came, he was the outsider in this contest, and he's come through, knocked out Michael Portillo, knocked out Kenneth Clarke. He knows that the Tory party has got to come together. It's got to talk about the issues that concern voters, not Europe.
But at the end of the day, he's a man that says never to the euro. How can you keep members of your party on board who are pro the euro and indeed Europhile when they have a leader who's absolutely opposed and immovable on this subject?
Yeah, but the Conservative Party, I mean, they know now this is not the issue that's going to win the election. It's going to be an issue decided at a referendum. Ian Duncan Smith is opposed. There are people who will be in the shadow cabinet who are in favour. They've got to work together. They know they've got to work together. They can't resolve this argument. But the party membership in the country has voted 60-40 for Ian Duncan Smith.
But maybe the party membership, maybe that just simply exactly. The party membership is overwhelming Eurosceptic, but that doesn't necessarily assume that the country will be when it comes to referendum.
Well, there is a curiosity here. That this is the one area, of course, where all opinion polls suggest that the country actually agrees with the Tory party, even though it is apparently a bit irritated by its obsession with Europe. So this is one area, and I think you're being a little bit unfair to the Tories there. Getting back to unifying the party, it was very interesting talking to David Curry, the lieutenant of Ken Clarke, this afternoon. In the wake of the result, he said this is a mandate for Ian Duncan Smith. He said the high turnover and the fairly overwhelming win, 61 to 39%, meant that Ian Duncan Smith, it was a very generous comment from an opponent. What I think is quite sinister is the absence of senior Portillo people in this camp. I mean, I was just looking at the last lot under Hague. You know, there's no Portillo, there's no Maud, there's no Archie Norman, there's no Anne Widdecombe. You know, this is an unbelievably inexperienced shadow cabinet underneath the most inexperienced Tory leader in history.
And David Davis says one of the more radical changes in the cabinet ever. Perhaps that's just been kind about it.
Well, for a radical, I mean, you know, put it in a different way. I mean, these people are untested. Oliver Letwin, the man who went missing for 5 days as Shadow Home Secretary. He's a very clever lad, but I mean, his political judgment is yet to be proven.
Martha, just to bring you in here about this, what do you think about the lack of Portillistas and in fact the silence of the Portillistas today?
Well, I think that is very interesting, and I think it's because they actually don't want to serve in the cabinet, shadow cabinet. And I was talking to one of their number, Archie Norman, and he as is known, wants to set up a think tank, and in fact they had a meeting about it today. The idea being that you have not only a pressure group as far as policy goes, but also a membership organisation that will be a way of recruiting some of the sort of newer members. And in fact it's something that one of the libertarians says, well, what we're losing out on is the sex and drugs and rock and roll agenda, that we need to recruit more people into.
So it's like a kind of fifth column of kind of hip people.
Well, that is the danger, that it will be there, and I think it is a worrying development for Ian Duncan Smith that section of the party is not there. But I think he is well aware of the fact that he can't afford to be portrayed as a loony right-winger. The Labour Party, the tabloid papers are all determined to do that, and I think he's giving a lot of thought to how he can avoid that and turn the debate onto the issues that he wants, not the ones that they want to caricature him on.
And of course tomorrow is an exceptional day, because in any other circumstances it would be the opportunity for Ian Duncan Smith, as it were, to lay out his stall, but obviously other matters and much, in a sense, more serious and global matters intervene.
High-profile occasion, the nation will be listening to him, and it is a subject expert on defence, former soldier, somebody who's close to America, and I think he's going to demonstrate that he wants to be on the side of the government. This is a time for the nation to come together, abandon partisan politics for this point, and I think that will be an important message for the Conservatives to signal too.
Thank you very much, Neil. Well, just turning to you, Martha, about that. A little more on tomorrow. I mean, you know, an incredibly serious day. Tony Blair has called Parliament back. What do you think the tone will be?
Well, I think, as George was saying, it's a very interesting day for Ian Duncan Smith. You think of his sort of first appearance as leader of the Conservative Party in the Commons, not a chance to bash the opposition around, which is perhaps something that in ordinary circumstances you might want to do. But again, he has very close contacts with the Bush administration. He saw Donald Rumsfeld, Bush's defence secretary, before Jeff Hoon did, something that I'm sure that he will be able to use. But I think it is a difficult day, and it's a day when I think the Commons as a whole will clearly be wanting to show solidarity, obviously, with the tragedy in America. But that's not to say that it's going to be uncontroversial, I don't think. I understand that at least 40 members on the government side have put their names down to speak in the debate. There are a number of Labour members who are concerned about the way Tony Blair's been approaching this issue. And actually, I was talking to one of their number, Peter Kilfoyle, earlier this evening, the former Defence Minister, and he had this to say about Tony Blair.
He should be cautious because of the pressure building up on the American administration to do something. And that something could be the wrong people or the wrong place if we're not very careful to focus on the right people. The last thing that Britain and indeed our United States allies need is to create a new generation of suicide bombers.
And I think that is a view that is shared by other Labour MPs. And they tend to be the same groups of people who are also worried that Tony Blair is getting too close to George Bush in other areas, in particular the very controversial area of missile defence. And now they're worried that what's happened in America is going to reopen calls for missile defence. They would argue it wouldn't have made any difference in these circumstances, but at a time when America may be feeling more defensive, more protectionist, more isolationist, that may renew calls for Son of Star Wars to be reopened.
Martha, George Jones, Peter O'Byrne, thank you very much indeed. In a moment, to look at tomorrow's papers, but first a roundup of today's news stories. Our main story tonight: there are a series of security alerts in the United States tonight. 4 people have been arrested trying to board an aircraft at New York's JFK airport. All the city's airports are now closed. The Vice President, Dick Cheney, has been moved to Camp David. The White House describes it as a precautionary measure. The Capitol building in Washington was temporarily evacuated after suspicious packages were spotted by legislators. Detectives investigating the murder of the black teenager Stephen Lawrence have arrested 4 people. The 2 men and 2 women are being questioned over allegations of perverting the course of justice. They're understood to be relatives and neighbours of one of the men cleared in the 1996 of murdering Stephen Lawrence. A judge in Peru has ordered the arrest of the former president Alberto Fujimori on human rights charges. Fujimori, who lives in self-imposed exile in Japan, has been charged with responsibility for 2 massacres during his 10 years in office, one in 1991 and the other in 1992. He denies the charges. The Culture Secretary, Tessa Jowell, has given the BBC the go-ahead for 3 new digital TV stations and 5 digital radio channels. But she's rejected plans for a television channel aimed at younger viewers, saying the BBC hadn't made a strong enough case. And the markets, the FT 100 share index closed up, while in New York the Dow Jones remained closed today. Against the pound, the euro fell slightly. Against the dollar, sterling rose. Tomorrow morning's front pages now, and there are more stories of the British losses, our loss. The first picture of some of the tragic Britons among the 5,000 feared dead. Pictures there of stockbrokers, an IT manager, investment banker, a publisher, a company chief, a labourer and an options broker. Moving on to the Daily Star, it goes with a much higher figure. It says 1,000 Brits dead. The Independent: wounded nation braces for war. Firemen found alive in rubble. Moving on to The Guardian, the New York rescuers in aftershock danger. Duncan Smith is the new Tory leader. And finally, in the Financial Times, Bush urges new war on terrorism. Well, that's all from Newsnight tonight, but there's round-the-clock news coverage on BBC News 24. I'll be back with more tomorrow, and Mark Lawson will be here with Newsnight Review. Until then, from all of us here, good night. Stay safe.
Hello there, good evening. Some of us have seen some heavy rain and others have had some very gusty winds, all thanks to low pressure. In fact, as we head away north across Britain, you can just see the swirls of cloud and rain that we've had. The low itself has been tracking south across Britain and it has brought some quite nasty conditions for some. Now, Carlisle saw an inch of rain, Buxton in Derbyshire a little bit more than an inch with 28 millimetres, quite a gusty northwest wind, and up to the north as the low finally cleared, it did allow the sun to break through. So it was a much improved picture in Scotland, and for example in Shetland today we had some sunshine over 8 hours in Lerwick. Now, it will be a better day for most of us on Friday. The main low will have pulled away in towards Germany and Denmark and we'll have a little ridge of high pressure, so a quieter day for all of us, although later a front will bring some changes to the north. So apart from the odd shower in eastern England first thing, there'll be a much more pleasant morning with some sunshine. It won't be anywhere near as gusty either, but eventually cloud will spill in from the north as our front approaches, and that will bring some spells of showery rain to Northern Ireland, Cumbria and also many parts of Scotland, although the southeast of Scotland probably staying dry until after dark. Now, in the west of Scotland, temperatures struggling a bit with a freshening west wind, 14 or 15 degrees. But say around Edinburgh and down into Newcastle, 16 or 17 Celsius is okay, and 19 in the south is much better than we've had today, so it will feel more pleasant. Now, after those lighter winds for Friday, we'll actually see strengthening northwesterlies for the weekend. It'll feel quite chilly in that wind as well, and eventually the wind's going to turn more and more to the north or northeast, and that'll drag in more potent showers to eastern parts of England during the week and also through the weekend. So some quite unsettled weather to keep an eye on. And for Saturday's forecast, well, we have that brisk northwesterly. That'll bring plenty of showers, hail and thunder possible, but some sheltered eastern and southern areas could get away with a lot of dry weather and some decent sunshine. And on Sunday, with more of a northerly wind, eastern Scotland and eastern England will see most of the showers. Out to the west, it should be drier and brighter. And that's the weather.